Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam
warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Hello everyone, we are from group 2 and we're gonna deliver the material about kind of sentence. There is compound sentence, complex sentence, and compound complex sentence. My name is Haifatona as the moderator of this group. Now I will introduce our group's member. The first one is Hifni Mila Hanifia. The second one is Jasmine Aisyah Wijayanti. The third one is me, Raji Fatona. The fourth one is Novel Octaviansa. The fifth one is Rizka Risnayanti. And the last one is Sela Ranatasia. Okay, without any further ado, let's get to the material. For the first reader, Hifni, time is yours.
Okay, thank you, Nazmi. Now I will explain about compound sentence. What is compound sentence? Compound sentences have more than one subject and more than one verb. There are two complete thoughts joined by a punctuation mark, usually a semicolon or a conjunction. Remember that an independent clause is a complete sentence or thought that has a subject and a verb. That means two independent clauses are two complete thoughts joined together. Let's look at an example of a compound sentence. So here are the two important parts of compound sentence. It is independent clause and conjunction. For the first one, what is independent clause? It is an arrangement of words containing at least a subject and verb. Understand? Example, Julia sleeps. In this example, it is have Julia for the subject and sleep as the verb. And the next one is conjunction. One of the keys in compound sentence is the conjunction. The conjunction is located between the independent clause, namely after the first independent clause and before the second independent clause. For example, the first one is word and. If we use and as a conjunction, it means the second independent clause is an addition to the first independent clause. The second is or, it means the first and second independent clauses contain options. The next is word so, it is the second independent clause is the result of the first independent clause. The next is for, it means the first independent clause is a result and the second independent clause is a cause or a reason. And the last is word but. It means the first and second independent clauses are opposite or contradicting each other. Thank you.
For the next Jasmine.
Thank you, Nazmi. You need to remember that in compound sentences, after the first independent clause and before the conjunction, you need to add a comma. An example of compound sentence. I clean my room and I wash the dishes. And the identification is I clean my room as independent clause and I wash the dishes as second independent clause and as conjunction. Next is complex sentence. A complex sentence is a sentence that contains an independent clause and one or more dependent clauses. An independent clause can stand alone as a sentence, but a dependent clause, even though it has a subject and a verb, cannot stand alone.
For the next slide, I will read as the third reader. Complex sentence. Here are some examples of complex sentences. The independent clause in bold. Bobby was delighted he got a part in the school play, even though the part was a small one. The independent clause is Bobby was delighted he got part in the school play. The second example is because my porridge had gone cold, I heated it in microwave. The independent clause is I heated it in microwave. Complex sentences explained. As you may have noticed from the example above, a complex sentence can either start with the independent clause or the subordinate clause. If the subordinate clause comes first, you must add a comma. This is not needed if the independent clause comes first. For the next slide, Noval as the fourth reader.
While for the first, an independent clause contains a subject and a verb. It can stand alone as a complete thought. For example, the football match was cancelled. And the second is a subordinate clause, or we can say subclause, cannot stand alone. It needs to be linked to the independent clause to make sense. For example, because it was raining. And for the third, put the two together and you have a complex sentence. Often the sentence will make sense whether the independent clause or the subordinate clause or subclause is put first. For example, the first, because it was raining, the football match was cancelled, and the independent clause is the football match was cancelled, and the subclause is because it was raining. And the next for the complex sentence, dependent clause, bound clause is also called a fragment or sentence that is incomplete and cannot stand alone. A dependent clause is usually preceded by a subordinating conjunction, which also combines the independent clause and the dependent clause in a complex sentence. There are seven coordinating conjunctions in a dependent clause: and, for, so, but, no, or yet. Thank you.
For the next reader, Rizka.
Okay, thank you, the moderator. So I will explain about compound complex sentence is more complicated sentence containing with at least two independent clauses and one dependent clause. Before we do about compound complex sentence, we have to understand the term independent sentence and dependent sentence. Independent clause is a sentence that can stand alone on its own. For example, my father came home. An dependent clause is a sentence that cannot stand on its own. For example, so we eat together. And next, use of conjunction in compound complex sentence. Conjunctions that you can use to connect dependent and independent sentence include: the first one is a conjunction to show time, such as before, after, while, since, and until. And the second one, a conjunction to show a condition or condition, such as unless, and if. And the third one, a conjunction that shows cause and effect, such as therefore, because, and order to. And the fourth, uh, conjunction to clarify, identify, such as when, where, who, that. And the last, conjunction to show opposites, such as although.
Okay, for the last
Thank you.
reader, Sela.
Okay, thank you to the moderator. And how to write a compound complex sentence. After we make one independent clause and one dependent clause, we have to make another independent clause that's relatable to the other sentence. In the example, we have my father came home, and so we eat together. Now we make another independent sentence. He brought pizza. And after that we need a conjunction to link them up. In the end, it will be a perfect compound complex sentence. My father came home and he brought pizza, so we eat together. So here is the structure of compound complex sentence. Here is dependent clause plus conjunction plus independent clause plus conjunction plus dependent clause. It it could be one or more, and then you can also use conjunction plus dependent clause, one or more dependent clause plus independent clause plus conjunction plus independent clause. Thank you.
Okay, that's all for our presentation. Thank you very much for your attention. Do you have any questions?
May I ask, Leslie?
Sure.
Okay, for question is in a compound sentence that you have what is explained that in common sentence have more than one subject and one more than one verb. But why in your example only have one subject and one verb, such as Julia sleeps? It's clear,
Okay,
Nazmi?
it's clear. Thank you very much. Any
You.
other questions? Any other questions? No? Okay.
I will to try answer your question, Anissa.
Okay, Noval.
Because in definition compound sentence have more than one subject and more than one verb. Sedangkan untuk independent clause it is for at least a subject and verb. So in independent clause this is independent clause, not example compound sentence. So for independent clause have a subject and verb. For example, Julia is a subject and sleep is a verb. I think it's enough for me.
Is it clear, Anissa?
Yes, Nazmi, thank you. And then Julia sleep is the example from independent classes.
Right.
Yes. Thank you, Noval. Thank you, Nazmi.
Anytime. Okay, any other questions? No? If there's no more questions, I will read the conclusion. So the conclusion is first, a compound sentence has two independent clauses. A complex sentence has one independent clauses and one dependent clause. And for compound complex sentence has two or more independent clauses and at least one dependent clause. Thank you very much for your attention. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Ini bentar ya, ibunya belum ngirim link absen.
Stop record aja dulu.
Oh iya, astagfirullah.